Nobody in that luxury restaurant knew what was about to unfold. Not the waitstaff rushing between tables, balancing trays and taking orders. Not the wealthy diners enjoying their expensive meals, lost in their own conversations. And certainly not the arrogant employee who had just made the worst mistake of his career. All they saw was a humble man in simple clothes, standing at the entrance. T-shirt, jeans, sneakers, nothing fancy, nothing that screamed importance or power. To everyone watching, he looked ordinary, maybe even out of place in such an upscale establishment. The employee saw him too, and in that split second he made a judgment, a quick assumption based on appearances, based on clothes, based on what he thought he knew about people who belong and people who don't. One rude comment later, everything was about to change. Not with anger, not with a scene, not with shouting or chaos, or the kind of confrontation you'd expect, but with a revelation that would leave everyone speechless, because sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody notices. The one dressed down instead of dressed up. The one who doesn't need to announce themselves, because their character speaks louder than any title ever could. And in about 60 seconds, that employee was going to learn a lesson he'd never forget. The entire restaurant was about to witness something rare, something that would spread across the internet within hours. Not because of drama, not because of conflict, but because of what happened when humility met arrogance face to face. Have you ever witnessed someone judge a book by its cover, only to realize they made a terrible mistake? The kind of mistake that changes everything in an instant. It was a busy Friday evening at one of Manila's most upscale restaurants. The kind of place where reservations are made weeks in advance, where every detail matters, where the atmosphere itself feels expensive. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, catching the light and scattering it across white tablecloths. Soft jazz played in the background, just loud enough to add elegance but quiet enough that conversations flowed easily. Well-dressed patrons filled every table. Designer suits, evening gowns, jewelry that caught the eye. This wasn't just a restaurant, it was a statement. A place where Manila's elite came to see and be seen. Outside, as the sun began to set, a black SUV pulled up quietly to the entrance. No fanfare, no photographers waiting, no crowd gathering to catch a glimpse of someone famous, just a simple vehicle, blending in with the evening traffic. The door opened, and Manny Pacquiao stepped out. He was wearing a plain T-shirt, faded jeans, sneakers that had seen better days. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd just finished something physical and hadn't bothered to fix it. Because he had. He'd just come from the gym, from hours of training, his body still warm from the work. He'd opened this restaurant months ago. Not as a vanity project, not to add another business to his portfolio for the sake of it, but to give back to his community, to create jobs, to build something that would outlast his years in the ring. And today he wanted to check in, see how things were running, not as the owner making a grand entrance, but as someone who genuinely cared about what happened inside these walls. He walked through the front doors with a warm smile on his face, the kind of smile that comes naturally when you're proud of something you've built. He looked around at the bustling space, servers moving with practiced efficiency, tables full of happy customers, the kitchen doors swinging open and closed as plates went out and empty dishes came back. Everything seemed to be running smoothly. To anyone watching him walk in, he didn't look like the owner. He didn't look like a boxing champion. He didn't look like someone whose face had been on magazine covers around the world. He just looked like a regular guy. Maybe someone who'd wandered in off the street, curious about the place. Maybe even underdressed for such an elegant establishment. And that's the thing about success that most people don't understand. It doesn't always announce itself. Real power doesn't need a spotlight. True accomplishment doesn't require validation from strangers. The most powerful people in a room are often the quietest, the most humble. The ones who've achieved so much that they no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone. The hostess near the entrance smiled politely at him, the way she smiled at everyone who walked through those doors. Professional, welcoming. She didn't recognize him. The servers continued their dance between tables, carrying trays, refilling glasses, answering questions about the menu. None of them looked twice at the man in the simple clothes. But near the bar, polishing a wine glass and surveying his domain, one employee noticed Manny immediately. His name was Marco, floor manager, 6 months into the job, young, ambitious, and proud of the authority his position gave him. He straightened his expensive suit jacket. the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He prided himself on maintaining standards, on keeping this restaurant at the level it deserved, and his reaction to seeing Manny wasn't welcoming. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. He set down the wine glass with a soft clink, because in his mind, he'd already made a judgment. Marco straightened his expensive suit jacket and walked toward Manny with a look of disapproval painted across his face. Each step was deliberate, purposeful, the kind of walk that said he was in charge here and he knew it. He approached with his chin slightly raised, that subtle tilt that people use when they think they're better than someone else. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his tone polite on the surface but condescending underneath. The kind of politeness that isn't really polite at all. "I don't think you understand our dress code here." Manny looked up from admiring the restaurant's interior. His smile was still there, genuine and warm. "I'm sorry? This is a high-end establishment?" Marco interrupted, not even letting him finish. His voice carried just enough volume that nearby tables could hear. And he knew it. He wanted them to hear. Wanted them to see him doing his job, maintaining standards. "We serve a certain clientele here. A certain type of guest who appreciates what we offer. And I'm going to have to ask you to leave." A few heads turned at nearby tables. The kind of turn that's quick, trying not to be obvious but curious. Whispers started. Quiet at first, just murmurs between dinner companions leaning slightly toward each other. Manny remained calm. His expression didn't change. He'd faced worse than this. Much worse. "I understand. But I actually, sir, please." Marco's voice grew firmer now, almost theatrical. There was an edge to it. A sharpness that hadn't been there before. He was enjoying this. Enjoying the power. The control. The feeling of being the one who decides who belongs and who doesn't. "Don't make this difficult for both of us. There are plenty of other places in the city more suited to your budget. Places where you'd feel more comfortable." The words hung in the air. Suited to your budget. The implication was clear. Insulting. Designed to make Manny feel small. One of the senior waiters, a woman named Maria who'd been working there since opening day, approached quickly from across the dining room. Her eyes were wide with panic. She'd recognized Manny the moment he walked in. Her heart was racing. "Marco, wait." She whispered urgently, trying to keep her voice low enough that guests wouldn't hear, but firm enough to get his attention. But Marco waved her off without even looking at her. Completely focused on proving his authority, on showing everyone in the restaurant that he was the one who maintained standards. Who kept this place elite. "Maria, I've got this handled. Please return to your section." He turned back to Manny, and there was something almost smug in his expression now. "Unless you have a reservation." He continued, letting the words drag out slowly, which I highly doubt given the circumstances. "I'm going to need you to exit through the front doors." Now. The room was watching now. Not even pretending to look away anymore. Some diners looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Others seemed almost entertained by the drama unfolding before them. Like dinner and a show, a woman at a corner table whispered to her husband, loud enough to be heard. Should someone say something? Her husband shook his head, eyes down at his plate. "Not our business." Manny took a quiet breath, slow, controlled. The kind of breath he took before stepping into the ring. He could end this instantly. One word, one revelation, and Marco's entire world would collapse. But something told him to wait, to see how far this would go. To understand who his employees really were when they thought no one important was watching. Because this wasn't just about him being disrespected. This was about character, about how people treat those they believe are beneath them. Those they think don't matter. Maria tried again, her voice more desperate now. "Marco, you really need to listen to me." "Maria, I said I have this under control." Marco snapped, his professional mask slipping for just a moment, his frustration showing through. He stepped closer to Manny, invading his space slightly. Not quite threatening, but definitely aggressive. Definitely crossing a line. "Sir, I'm trying to be respectful here, but you're making this harder than it needs to be. This restaurant has a reputation to uphold. Standards that we don't compromise on. And right now, you're not meeting those standards." He gestured toward Manny's clothes with barely concealed disdain. "I'm sure you understand." The words were a dismissal. Final. Absolute. And Manny, standing there in his simple t-shirt and jeans, just looked at him. Really looked at him. Studying him. Reading him the way he read opponents in the ring. Have you ever been judged unfairly based on how you looked? based on assumptions someone made in seconds, without knowing anything about who you really are. How did you handle it? Did you lash out? Did you defend yourself immediately? Or did you do what Manny was doing right now, staying calm, staying controlled, and letting the moment reveal exactly who people are when they think they have power over you? Just then, another customer stood up from his table near the window. A businessman in a designer suit, expensive watch catching the light. He'd been scrolling through his phone between bites of his meal when something made him look up. His eyes went from his screen to Manny, then back to his screen, then back to Manny again. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, loud enough that the entire section could hear. "Is that Manny Pacquiao?" The question hung in the air. Marco froze. His hand, which had been gesturing toward the door, stopped mid-motion. Several other diners immediately pulled out their phones, squinting at Manny, then at their screens, comparing, checking, trying to be sure. A woman gasped from 2 tables over. "Oh my God, it's him!" Another voice. "The boxer? The champion?" The murmurs spread like wildfire across the dining room. Phones came up, cameras pointing. People half standing from their chairs to get a better look. But Marco, his face flushing red now, his pride wounded and his authority challenged in front of everyone, did something unexpected. He doubled down. "I don't care who you claim to be," he said, his voice shaking slightly but trying to sound firm, trying to maintain control of a situation that was rapidly slipping away from him. "Rules are rules. This establishment has standards, and if you can't respect those standards..." His words came out faster now. Defensive. Like a man who'd committed to a path and couldn't find his way back even though he knew he was wrong. "We can't just make exceptions for everyone who walks in here claiming to be someone famous. I've seen it before. People trying to use names, trying to get special treatment." Manny looked at Maria, who was now visibly terrified. Her hands were clasped together almost like she was praying, begging him silently with her eyes. "Please don't be angry. Please understand he doesn't know what he's doing. She'd worked so hard to get this job, saved money to help her family, and now she was watching her manager destroy everything in real time." Manny had a choice to make in this moment. A decision that would define not just how this night ended, but what kind of leader he actually was. He could reveal himself right now, pull out his ID, have the chef come out, make it clear who owned this place, embarrass Marco publicly in front of all these people with their cameras recording. Watch him shrink and apologize and beg for forgiveness. It would be easy. Satisfying even. The kind of justice people love to see on social media. The arrogant employee getting exactly what he deserves. Or he could let this play out. See who his employees really were when they thought no one important was watching. When they believed they had power over someone powerless. Because here's what most people don't understand about moments like this. They're tests. Not tests of the person being disrespected, but tests of the person doing the disrespecting. Marco had no idea he was revealing everything about his character right now. Every word, every gesture, every assumption, it was all on display. This wasn't about ego for Manny, never had been. Even in the ring, even with all the championships, all the fame, all the wealth, he'd never forgotten where he came from. He'd been the person others looked down on. The poor kid from General Santos City, who people said would never amount to anything. The fighter who was too small, too disadvantaged, too far from the centers of power to ever make it. He knew what it felt like to be judged before you even opened your mouth. And now, standing here in his own restaurant, being told he didn't belong, he had to decide something important. Was this about proving Marco wrong? Or was this about understanding what was actually happening in his business when he wasn't around? How were his employees treating regular customers who came in without reservations, without designer clothes, without the right look? If Marco treated him this way, how many others had been made to feel small, unwelcome, not good enough? Manny nodded slowly. His face was calm, unreadable. "I understand your concern about standards," he said gently, his voice steady. "Could I speak to the owner?" The words were simple, reasonable, not aggressive, not demanding. Marco laughed. Actually laughed. A short, sharp sound that carried disbelief and condescension in equal measure. "The owner doesn't take meetings with walk-ins, sir. He's a very busy man. Very important. He doesn't have time for..." He paused, looking Manny up and down one more time. For situations like this, someone at a nearby table whispered urgently to their companion, "Should we tell him?" "Don't get involved," came the response. The phones were still out. still recording, capturing every second of this interaction, and Manny just stood there, patient, dignified, letting Marco dig himself deeper with every word. Because real character isn't shown when people know who you are, when they're trying to impress you, when they're on their best behavior because someone important is watching. It's revealed when they think you're nobody, when they believe you can't help them or hurt them, when there's nothing to gain from treating you with kindness. That's when you see who people really are. And in this moment, Manny was learning more about his business, about his employees, about the culture he'd created, than any report or meeting could ever tell him. The question was, what was he going to do with that knowledge? Marco S. Taupe. Maria's voice cut through the tension, firm, louder than she'd spoken before. She stepped directly between Marco and Manny, her body language shifting from fearful to protective. She wasn't asking anymore. She was telling. Marco's head snapped toward her, his eyes flashing with anger. Maria, step aside now. No, she said simply. Her hands were shaking, but her voice held steady. You need to listen to me. I need you to do your job. Marco snapped back, his professional mask completely gone now. The polite floor manager had vanished. What remained was someone desperate to maintain control, to prove he was right, to avoid admitting he'd made a catastrophic mistake. His voice carried across the restaurant, sharp, aggressive, the kind of tone that made people flinch. The dining room had gone almost silent. Conversations had stopped mid-sentence. Forks rested on plates. Wine glasses sat untouched. Everyone was watching now, not pretending to mind their own business anymore. This had become the main event. Some people looked uncomfortable, like they wanted to leave but didn't know how without making it worse. Others leaned forward in their seats, phones still recording, capturing every moment. This is my responsibility as floor manager. Marco continued, his finger pointing at Maria now. And I'm handling it. So unless you want to be written up for insubordination, Marco, please. Maria tried again, her voice quieter now but urgent. Desperate. Just listen for 1 second. I don't have time for this. He turned back toward Manny, his frustration boiling over. Sir, for the last time, you need to leave this restaurant immediately or I will call security. That's when the kitchen doors burst open. The sound was loud, sudden. Metal doors slamming against the walls. The head chef came rushing out, still wearing his white apron stained with sauce and oil. His chef's hat was slightly crooked. He had a wooden spoon still in one hand. His eyes scanned the dining room quickly, looking for something. Then they landed on Manny, and his entire face lit up. Boss! He shouted, weaving between tables in his haste to get across the room. Mr. Pacquiao! He was nearly running now, his shoes squeaking on the polished floor. He almost knocked over a chair in his hurry. The word, boss, echoed through the silent restaurant. Marco's face went completely white. All the blood drained from it in an instant. His mouth opened slightly but no sound came out. Be boss, he stammered, the word barely a whisper. The chef ignored him completely. Didn't even glance in his direction. He reached Manny and grabbed his hand, shaking it warmly with both of his own hands. Sir, we didn't know you were coming today. Why didn't you call ahead? We would have prepared something special, your favorite table. Anything you wanted. The restaurant erupted in murmurs. Louder now, no longer trying to be discreet. He owns this place. That's actually Pacquiao. Oh my God, did that manager just try to kick out the owner? Phones were everywhere now, dozens of them, recording from every angle. The footage was probably already being uploaded, shared, sent to friends with messages like, you won't believe what I just witnessed. Manny smiled kindly at the chef, that same warm smile he'd walked in with. I wanted to see how everything runs normally. When I'm not expected. When things are just happening the way they naturally happen. He paused, his eyes moving to Marco, who looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. And I think I'm learning a lot. Marco tried to speak. His mouth moved. His lips formed shapes, but nothing coherent came out, just fragments. Broken pieces of sentences. I didn't, you don't look like. He couldn't finish. Couldn't find the words to explain what he'd done. How he'd jumped to conclusions based on appearances. Based on clothes. Based on assumptions about who deserves respect and who doesn't. Several diners started applauding. Slow at first. Then others joined. The sound built. Some people actually stood up from their tables. A few were calling out, asking for autographs, for photos, trying to get Manny's attention. Mr. Pacquiao, could we get a picture? We're huge fans! I can't believe you're here! But Manny raised his hand gently, not aggressively, not demanding silence, just a small gesture that somehow cut through all the noise. The applause faded. The voices quieted. Everyone settled back down, waiting to see what would happen next. He turned to Marco, who was standing frozen. His expensive suit suddenly seemed too tight. Too much. His perfectly styled hair and his designer watch and his air of authority, all of it had crumbled. He looked small now, exposed, like a man who just realized he'd destroyed something he couldn't fix. Maria stood off to the side, her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. Relief mixed with fear. Relief that Manny knew the truth now. Fear for what would happen to Marco. Fear for what would happen to all of them. The general manager had appeared from somewhere, rushing over, his face pale with panic. He'd been in his office. He'd heard the commotion but hadn't known what was happening until it was too late. Other staff members were gathering at the edges of the dining room. Servers. Bartenders. The hostess. All of them watching. All of them understanding that everything was about to change. If you were Manny in that moment, standing there with everyone watching, with cameras recording, with an employee who just humiliated you in front of dozens of people, what would you do? Would you fire Marco on the spot? Make an example of him? Show everyone what happens when you disrespect the owner? Or would you do something different? Something unexpected? Marco, Manny said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence. Calm, measured, so controlled that it somehow carried more weight than if he'd shouted, "Come with me." He didn't wait for a response. Just turned and walked toward a private room off the main dining area. The kind of room reserved for special guests, for private parties, for meetings that needed to happen away from prying eyes. Marco followed like a man walking to his execution. His legs felt heavy. Each step took effort. His hands trembled at his sides. He couldn't look at anyone. Not the diners watching him. Not his fellow staff members. Not Maria, whose eyes were filled with concern. The general manager quickly fell in step behind them. Then the chef. Then Maria, who couldn't bear to stay outside not knowing what was happening. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Inside, the sounds of the restaurant faded. Just muffled voices and distant music. The room felt smaller than it was, more serious. Manny sat down calmly at the head of the table. Not in a power move kind of way. Just naturally, like he belonged there. Because he did. Marco stood, unable to sit, unable to move. Just frozen in the middle of the room, his eyes fixed on the floor. The others stood along the walls waiting, watching. "Tell me," Manny began, leaning back slightly in his chair. His voice was still gentle, still controlled. But there was something beneath it now, something firm. "Why did you treat me that way?" Marco swallowed hard, his throat felt dry. "Sir, I thought." The words died in his mouth. "You thought what?" Manny pressed. Not aggressively, just waiting, giving him space to explain. "The dress code," Marco finally managed. "I thought you weren't following the dress code. The dress code is for comfort and ambience." Manny said, his tone becoming firmer now. More direct. Not for judging people's worth. Not for deciding who deserves to be here and who doesn't. He leaned forward slightly. "Did I seem disrespectful when I walked in? Was I rude to anyone? Did I cause a disturbance?" "No, sir." "Then why did you assume I didn't belong?" Silence. The kind of silence that presses down on you. That demands an answer even though no words are being spoken. Marco's eyes were starting to fill with tears. His jaw clenched, trying to hold them back, trying to maintain some shred of dignity. "I don't know," he whispered finally. I saw you and I made a judgment. I assumed based on how you were dressed that you couldn't afford to eat here. That you didn't understand what kind of place this is." The admission hung in the air. Raw. Honest. Maria spoke up carefully from her position near the door. "Sir, I tried to tell him. I recognized you immediately. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen." Manny nodded at her warmly. A small smile touched his face. "I know you did, Maria. Thank you. I saw what you tried to do." Relief flooded her features. He turned back to Marco. "You embarrassed a guest in front of everyone. You made assumptions based on appearance, based on clothes, based on your own prejudices about who deserves respect." Each word landed like a hammer. "And whether that guest was me or anyone else, that's not how we treat people here. That's not what this restaurant stands for. That's not why I built this place." Marco's tears were falling now. Silent. streaming down his face. He didn't wipe them away, just let them fall. "I'm so sorry, sir," his voice broke. "Please, I need this job. I have a family, a wife, 2 kids. I made a terrible mistake. I know that, but please, I'm begging you." He stopped, unable to continue, the weight of what he'd done crushing down on him. The general manager stepped forward slightly. "Sir, I take full responsibility. I should have trained him better, should have made our values clearer. This is my failure." Manny held up his hand, not angrily, just stopping the flow of words. Everyone in the room held their breath. This was it. The moment of judgment. The moment when Marco's fate would be decided. In the silence, you could almost hear hearts beating. The tension was that thick. Manny looked at Marco for a long moment. Really looked at him. Seeing past the expensive suit. Past the tears. Past the mistake. Seeing a human being who'd failed. Who'd let pride and prejudice cloud his judgment. Who was now facing the consequences. "I'm not firing you, Marco." The words came out simply. Quietly, everyone in the room looked surprised, shocked even. Marco's head snapped up, his eyes wide, red from crying, disbelieving. "You're what?" "I'm not firing you," Manny repeated. "But you're suspended for 2 weeks, without pay." He stood up now, walking closer to Marco. "And during those 2 weeks, I want you to do something. I want you to volunteer at our community outreach center, the one I opened in Tondo. You're going to serve food to people who can't afford restaurants like this. People who struggle every day just to feed their families. People who would be grateful just to have the clothes you looked down on me for wearing." Marco was staring at him, speechless. "You're going to learn what I learned growing up with nothing. You're going to understand that a person's worth has nothing to do with what they're wearing or how much money they have. You're going to see dignity in people who society overlooks." Manny's voice was steady, strong, but not cruel. "And when you come back here after those 2 weeks, you're going to be a different kind of manager. The kind who treats everyone with respect. The kind who sees people, not appearances. The kind who understands that we're all human beings deserving of dignity." Marco was crying openly now, not trying to hide it anymore. "You're giving me another chance. Everyone deserves a second chance," Manny said simply. "But character isn't about how you treat people who can help you. People who have power. People who can make or break your career." He paused. "It's about how you treat people who can't do anything for you. People you think don't matter. People you believe are beneath you." He extended his hand. "That's what I need you to learn." Marco took his hand, shaking it, unable to speak through his tears, just nodding, grateful, humbled, changed, because in that moment he understood something profound. True authority isn't about punishment. It's not about wielding power over people who've wronged you. It's not about revenge or making examples or crushing those who make mistakes. It's about teaching. About lifting people up even when they've fallen. About giving them the tools to become better versions of themselves. That's the difference between a boss and a leader. A boss would have fired Marco, made him an example, felt justified in the decision. But a leader sees potential even in failure, sees the opportunity to transform someone, sees that true power is in redemption, not destruction. And everyone in that room felt it. Manny walked back into the dining room. The moment he stepped through the door, the entire restaurant rose to their feet. Every single person. The couple who'd been uncomfortable earlier. The businessman who'd first recognized him. The diners who'd been recording on their phones. Even the ones who'd stayed silent when they could have spoken up. They all stood and applauded. The sound filled the space. Genuine, heartfelt. Not just for a celebrity. Not just for a champion boxer. But for something they'd all just witnessed that went deeper than fame or titles. They'd seen leadership in its purest form. Manny waved humbly, almost embarrassed by the attention. Still just a man in a t-shirt and jeans. Still the same person who'd walked through those doors 30 minutes ago. Nothing about him had changed except everyone's perception. "Please, please," he said, gesturing for people to sit down. "Enjoy your meals. That's what you came here for." But they didn't sit immediately. They wanted more. Wanted to be part of this moment. "Mr. Pacquiao, can we get a photo?" "Just one picture, please. My kids will never believe this." And here's where you see the real measure of someone's character. Not in the big dramatic moments, but in how they treat people when they're asking for something small. When they're vulnerable. When they're excited and hoping you'll say yes. Manny could have excused himself. Could have gone to his private table. Could have said he was tired or busy or just wanted to eat in peace. And no one would have blamed him. Instead, he smiled. That genuine, warm smile that had never left his face. Of course, he said simply. He spent the next hour moving through the restaurant, table by table, taking photos with families, signing napkins for kids, listening to stories from people who'd watched his fights, who'd been inspired by his journey, who'd bet on him when everyone said he was too small to succeed. An elderly woman grabbed his hand and told him he'd given her hope when her husband was sick. That watching him fight taught her something about not giving up. He listened. Really listened. Not just nodding politely while thinking about something else, but present, engaged, caring about what she was saying. A young man asked for advice about starting a business with nothing. Manny sat down at his table and talked with him for 10 minutes, gave him real guidance, real encouragement, treated him like his dreams mattered. Because to Manny they did. The staff watched all of this. Maria wiping tears from her eyes, the chef beaming with pride. The general manager taking notes on his phone, understanding now what kind of culture they needed to build here. Even the other servers, the ones who'd stayed quiet during Marco's confrontation, were learning something. Seeing what it meant to lead by example, to treat everyone with dignity regardless of who they are or what they can do for you. Finally, Manny made his way to a corner table, the same area where he'd been standing when Marco first approached him. Full circle, he ordered a simple meal. Chicken adobo, rice, water, nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just food that reminded him of home, of where he came from, of the meals his mother used to make when they had barely enough to eat. He ate quietly, occasionally looking up to smile at someone who caught his eye, waving at kids who were too shy to come over but kept staring. Just a man enjoying a meal in his restaurant. By the next morning, the story had spread everywhere. Not just in Manila, not just in the Philippines. Across the world. Videos from dozens of phones, all capturing the same moment from different angles, flooded social media. Millions of views within hours. Tens of millions by the end of the day. But here's what's important. Here's what made this story different from every other viral celebrity moment. People didn't share it for the drama. They didn't share it to mock Marco, or to celebrate someone getting caught doing something wrong. They shared it for the compassion. They shared it because in a world where power usually means crushing people who disrespect you, Manny chose something different. Something better. They shared it because it reminded them that strength isn't about domination. It's about restraint. About choosing to lift someone up when you have every right to tear them down. Comments poured in by the thousands. This is what a real leader looks like. He could have destroyed that manager, but instead he taught him. The world needs more people like this. Parents showed the video to their kids, using it as a teaching moment. About humility, about second chances, about how you treat people when you have power over them. Teachers played it in classrooms, sparking discussions about prejudice and assumptions, and the importance of looking beyond appearances. Business leaders shared it in meetings, asking their teams what kind of culture they wanted to create, what values they wanted to embody. Because that night proved something powerful, something that resonates with people on a deep level. The strongest leaders don't humiliate people who make mistakes. They don't use their power to destroy. They don't need to prove their authority by crushing those beneath them. They teach, they guide, they give second chances. They understand that everyone is fighting battles we know nothing about. Everyone has families depending on them. Everyone deserves the opportunity to learn and grow and become better. And Marco? 2 weeks later, he returned to the restaurant. But he was different. You could see it in his eyes, in how he carried himself. The arrogance was gone, the judgment, the need to prove he was better than anyone. He greeted every guest the same way now, with warmth, with respect, with genuine care. He saw people, not appearances. He understood that dignity isn't something you earn through designer clothes, or expensive watches, or the right connections. It's something every human being deserves simply because they're human. And when people noticed the change in him, when they asked what happened, he told them the truth. I learned what real strength looks like, he'd say, and it changed everything. If you believe that true strength is shown through humility and second chances, we want to hear from you. We've got more inspiring stories coming your way. Real moments that show character. Grace. The power of staying grounded no matter how high you rise. Stories about people who could use their success to intimidate, but choose instead to inspire. Who could destroy but choose to build. Who understand that the measure of a person isn't what they achieve, but how they treat others along the way. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Was it when Marco made his assumptions? When Manny chose to give him a second chance? When the restaurant stood and applauded? Let us know in the comments so we can bring you more content that matters to you. More stories that remind us all what's truly important in this world. Because these aren't just stories. They're lessons. And we could all use more reminders about what it means to be truly human.